ಈಗ ಪುಸ್ತಕವನ್ನ ಬಿಡುಗಡೆ ಮಾಡಿರುವಂತಹ ಶ್ರೇಷ್ಠ ಕಲಾವಿದ ಮತ್ತು ಮನುಷ್ಯಪರ ತುಡಿತ ಗೀತೆಗಳನ್ನ ಹೊಂದಿರುವಂತಹ ನಸರುದ್ದೀನ್ ಶಾ ಅವರು ನಮ್ಮನ್ನು ಉದ್ದೇಶಿಸಿ ಮಾತಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. नसरुद्दीन जी
जरूर। सबको नमस्कार, आदाब। आई एम वेरी थैंकफुल to Samuday Karnataka, to Jan Natya Manch, to Vimalaji, Maloyshri and Sudhanva for bestowing this privilege on me to release Halla Bol in Kannada. Just like Sudhanva, I myself am ignorant of the language, even though I acted in 2 Kannada movies, in both of which I had a considerable amount to speak, but my diction was so bad that they had to replace my voice with the Kannada speaking actors. The only 2 phrases that remained with me are Matar Beda and Banni Kutkodi. These phrases were repeated so often on the sets that they registered in my head and they are still there. But apart from these 2 phrases and a few stray lines of dialogue that I spoke, I'm afraid my knowledge of Kannada is nil. So just like Sudhanva, I too will not be able to read I'm certain Venkatesh ji must have made a very accurate translation of this very important book. I must congratulate you, Venkatesh ji, and thank you for translating this book into Kannada. I have, however, read both the Hindi and the English versions, and I'm really grateful to Sudhanva for this extremely perceptive, knowledgeable, affectionate, lucid, and straightforward evocation of Safdar Hashmi. Particularly for those who, like me, had never met him or seen his work when he was alive. This is a particularly precious document. As I told Sudhanva earlier, that while reading it, by turns I was informed, amused, enraged, disturbed, and very, very moved by this account of Safdar from an insider's perspective. As I said, I never met Safdar, but when I was a newcomer at the drama school in 1970, I heard of his work. And I was very baffled by hearing about this man who was about my age, who was obviously a passionate lover of theatre and a committed practitioner of it, who would seldom, if ever, stage his plays in an auditorium to a paying audience. He would take his plays to the streets, for the common man, for the accidental spectator. He would take them to schools, to broaden the children's horizons. He would take them to factories and perform to the factory workers, trying to make them aware of the exploitation that they endured. And all his work was suffused with a very profound political and social consciousness. This is what I was told. At the age of 20, I must say, I found it all very boring. Because I was like any greenhorn who comes to study acting, had stars in my eyes. I dreamt of seeing my name in lights. I dreamt of performing in the largest auditoria to the largest audiences. I dreamt of being rich and famous. And here I was hearing of a person who loved theatre as much as I did, perhaps more, to whom none of these things mattered a bit. A person who was not after fame, who was not after amassing a fortune, who was not after getting his pictures in the papers. He was a person who'd found something more important than that to do with his life and his work. I was profoundly affected, but puzzled, as I said earlier, that how could a person have this kind of an attitude? It also made me, it was the first reminder perhaps that I received in my life of the fact that an actor's life can perhaps be of some use. Apart from just parading your wares and showing off your abilities. This was a great reminder, and this is something that has stayed with me. The next time I registered Safdar was when he died, when he was murdered. In the midst of a performance, of Halla Bol, and not by a lynch mob, mind you, not by cow vigilantes, but by paid goons of the ruling party then. The more things change, the more they stay the same, it seems. But this incident raised several questions in my mind, to which I only had an indistinct answer then, but I think I have resolved these questions now. And these questions were, would I have the courage to die for something I really believed in? Would I, knowing that my life was in peril, continue to speak truth to power? Would I, knowing that I may not live to see the fruits of my entire life's effort, would that deter me from the path I had chosen? I have the answers today in a time when almost all of us has a choice between either beating a jingoistic drum or being called a traitor. When to even question the government we have elected and which is answerable to us is considered unpatriotic. When the slightest note of dissent is interpreted as sedition. When to express your concern about the country you love is considered hate, speech, and divisiveness by those who are spreading the hate and the division themselves. When history, if not being distorted and rewritten, is being replaced by mythology, where we really seem to be moving backwards, the answers to these questions must be an unambiguous and resonant yes. As Sahid Ludhianvi said, आज भी अगर हम सब खामोश रहे, आज भी अगर हम सब खामोश रहे, तो इस दमकते हुए खाकदान की खैर नहीं. जुन्नों की टाली हुई एटमी बलाओं से जमीन की खैर नहीं, आसमां की खैर नहीं. Safdar Hashmi's life and his legacy, which is being carried forward by those who loved and supported him, is testimony to why fascistic powers are so terrified of artists, intellectuals, and activists. As Sudhanva had mentioned earlier, it's because the influence of artists and activists does not work immediately like a headache pill. It seeps into your sores, and its payoff happens years, maybe generations later. It is a longer lasting effect than hectoring. And as we are seeing today, activists and intellectuals are being hounded. It could only be a matter of time before artists also begin to feel the wrath of the government. I'm sorry to introduce this somber note into what is a celebration of Safdar Hashmi's life, but while we celebrate Safdar's life and take inspiration from what he did and what he could have done and aspire to it, we should also spare a moment to remember Sudha Bhardwaj, Varavara Rao, Stan Swami, Dr. Tel Tumre, and assure them that we stand in solidarity with them, that we admire their courage and their fortitude. May it never diminish. And to reassure them, let me just quote this line from the Faiz, which he wrote during his own incarceration. कि जलवागाहे विसाल की शम्में वो जला भी चुके तो क्या, जलवागाहे विसाल की शम्में वो बुझा भी चुके तो क्या, चांद को गुल करें तो हम जाने. Thank you.
ವಿಡಿಯೋವನ್ನ ವೀಕ್ಷಿಸಿದ್ದಕ್ಕಾಗಿ ಧನ್ಯವಾದಗಳು. ಈ ವಿಡಿಯೋವನ್ನ ಇತರರಿಗೂ ಶೇರ್ ಮಾಡಿ, ನಮ್ಮ ಚಾನೆಲ್ಗೆ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಕ್ರೈಬ್ ಆಗಿ, ಹಾಗೆ ನಿರಂತರ ಸುದ್ದಿಗಳಿಗಾಗಿ ಬೆಲ್ ಐಕಾನ್ ಅನ್ನು